Bloc. You're Aditya. Okay, wait a second, okay, here as well. So Lauren is not there. Jonala is not there. Chenyang is here. Okay. Akita is there, yes. You are? Chenyang? Okay, and who else? Kim Song is not there. Jinian is here. Brian is there, yes. Ananya is there. Rabani is not there. Nitya. CSEN is not there. Satya? No. Xian? Jian? Ah, you are there. Yumi? And Jing is there. Okay. Anybody who I didn't call? Josian, Aditya, Sravani, Kim Song, Lauren, Jonala? No. Okay. All right. Let's start. So today, first of all, I've prepared a few things for you guys. So remember, we in the class we did the qubit, right? We did the qubit in class, and that's I had a few things to edit in that code, and it's available in this tag, Lecture 7 Extra. I'm going to show you right now what is in there. We're going to review. Then I've also implemented the block, okay? How to use the block, and it's available at this tag, okay? The similar thing, but doing it with the block. Then, in this lecture, 8 start, we have the first Go router implementation, okay? Now here, the Lecture 7 Extra block, in this implementation, we also have the navigator. This is the Go router basic implementation, and then this is the Go router nested implementation. This is quite complex, okay? But it's a pattern that you can take and study, and you can really learn. You know, I expect you to understand everything today, but that's a pattern that works. So Kim Song arrived. Anybody else? No. Okay. So to pull the lectures, you can you know how to do them, right? I just pull them in with just these branch names. If you want to do that, you can do that. Why don't you pull the first one, the Lecture 7 Extra, as L7X, and then we will just have a quick look at that. You're Satya, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've just pulled that qubit implementation. Let's have a look at, let's start with the main.dart. Have you pulled it? Why don't you pull it and run it quickly, those who can. And those who are waiting for the new M4 MacBook Pro, I guess they'll have to look at the screen of their friends because their Windows machine can't handle it. Huh? It can?
Yeah.
Yours can?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Only
Have you guys got this?
Is it lecture 8 start or lecture 8?
No, lecture 7 extra. It's called lecture 7 extra. Extra, just extra. This one. This is basically where we left the qubit, and I had a few more things to add, and that's that. Okay? And remember, in this lecture, what we did was we started the lecture with the repository provider. So we tried to, we worked with a repository provider, and now with the qubit, can I continue? Are you guys ready? Or not? Okay, I'll give one more minute. You have it running?
No such file are there.
Okay. Those who have running, can you please raise your hand? You have it?
Error. There's an error.
What's the error?
For some reason, when I pulled it, showed me
But because all of these things are not saved, you're probably pulling it over an existing thingy. Just close all these pages, then it should be fine. Without saving them. Okay, I'm continuing. So, if you remember, we did this stateful login page, right? Which was basically a stateful widget, which was calling the login user method of the repository. It was calling the login user method of the repository from within the stateful widget, which we said it really is very ugly and it's very bad code. Okay, so we therefore decided to do the following. So we decided to so we have our app. It's wrapped with the repository provider authentication repository, so that's fine. And then we are presenting the login page as the first destination. Okay, so let's have a look at this login page. So the login page. So under pages, I created a login directory, and in that login directory, I have the qubit, I have the views, okay? And that's the main login page file. So the main login page file, what it does right, is when it's trying to build itself, it creates the login qubit, okay? And into the login qubit, it injects the authentication repository. So the argument of the login qubit is the authentication repository. So that's the way the qubit becomes aware of who is the authentication repository, okay? And then, as soon as we create it, we run the init method in it. That's sort of a typical way to run these things. And sometimes in the init method, you can also send parameters that come into your widget, okay? And then before, or not before, by the way I'm building my screen is through a block builder. And block builder is just like a switcher, right? Or think of it like the round table, the turning round table thing or turntable thing in Chinese restaurants. It's something like that, right? So depending on what you want or what the state says it should be, it serves different views, right? It serves, depending on the state runtime type, it either serves login error, login waiting, logged in, and login initial. It serves different views. And what I need to do is, depending on each state, I need to create a view. But the beauty of it is that instead of putting the view logic into one big build statement, which was in the stateful widget, I'm now making simple views. Error view, just a little error message. Waiting view, a spinner, the other one. So the views are very, very simple objects or simple widgets which sit in the view directory, right? What happened? Sorry. Which sit in the view directory. For example, the initial view, unfortunately, the initial view has to be a stateful widget because we're using a form in it, okay? So the stateful widget has to be there, but we're only using the statefulness of it because of the form. Because when we have a form, for validation, we need to use all the dynamics that the form object gives us, basically making all these error text red, etc. All of that logic is built into the form widget, okay? And the way that we can run that easily through the setState method, if it's a form, we still keep it as a stateful widget, but everything else, like the error view, is a stateless widget. Logged in view, also stateless widget. Waiting view, stateless widget. Everything else can be a stateless widget, but if it's a form, you have it as a stateful widget. Okay? So, again, what is inside the qubit, right? You have the init function, but init function at the moment is empty, right? Because we don't need it, but as a form, it's good to have it there. Reset function, or reset method, it sets the user to null and emits a login initial method. And login initial is just going to bring the this page, where we can enter email and password. So let's enter an email and password here. And it now, when we did that, let's look at the state. So initial view on the filled button, what we do is that we first validate the form. Remember? We validate the form. Then we save the form, basically triggering the onSaved method of each of the text fields, so that we save the email and password into a local variable. And then we call the login user function of the qubit with these parameters, right? So therefore, inside the qubit, we are running this login user function, which gets us email and password. While we're trying to log in, because the authentication repository takes some time to run, while we're trying to log in, we emit a waiting state so that this page the login page captures the waiting state and emits the waiting view here, right? And then once we get our user, we emit the logged in view, okay? And this is the logged in view. Logged in view has two things. I can reset it and go to the original page, or I can trigger an error. If I trigger an error, it shows in the error page just to show that functionality. Again, how do I trigger an error? It's in the logged in view. I have another filled button which calls the error method of the qubit. Okay? Any questions on the qubit's workings? No questions. Excellent. Then we're moving to the block pattern, okay? Now this is L7 extra, lecture 7 extra block. Let me show it to you here. It's this one. Lecture. So you can do git tag -L to see all the tags. Okay, let's just talk about Flutter Navigator very quickly. Okay, we have to sort of know it, but we really are going to focus on the Go router because that's the robust mechanism to do things. So what is a navigator? Navigator is basically for the device to put to paint a full screen, and you can have 3 different layers of screens or on the stack at any given time. So the initial page is done home page, and on top of it, the application can bring the login page, and on top of it, you can have, for example, an alert dialog. All of them are on the stacks. And the way you can get rid of the alert dialog is by saying navigator.pop. Okay, so navigator.pop pops the top level page from the stack. Okay? Navigator.push requires the context again, but it also requires the widget or the page that needs to be pushed on, or the build method of the page that needs to be pushed on. So if I want to push a profile page on top of the login page, then I have to use this type of command. And we'll see examples of that. If I want to pop from the stack, as I said, you have the navigator.pop from the stack. The other one is navigator.push replacement. So push replacement is basically gets rid of this and replaces it with this. It doesn't increase the stack. Okay? So these are sort of typical navigation fields. Now, how do we use this basic navigator in the material app is in this fashion. So your material app has an initial route. By default, it's slash, just like in the web. And then the slash, if I give it a route called slash, then it goes to the home page. If I give it a slash no block, it goes to this page. I mean, here in this example, what we're doing it, we basically presenting in one app the three different methods of implementation of the login repository. One is the stateful widget, the first one that we did. The second one is the qubit, and the third one is the block, which you haven't seen yet, but it's on this repo. Okay. So and we will switch between these ones using the navigator. And so when I first run my app, I'll go to the initial route, which is the home page. And what home page has is a few buttons that takes me to these other routes. And if I say, go to the no block route, basically it creates this stateful login page and paints it there. It creates the block, for block, I've called it a sign-in page, and the qubit login page. They do the same thing, but I wanted to change, differentiate the names. They do the same thing. Okay, so, and basically, what was I saying? Yeah, so we're going to use navigator.push named this one, or if I've not put a name for it, because remember, here in the material app, I defined some routes. So I defined a /qubit route, and it knows, the material app already knows what to do with that name. It says, okay, I need to put this widget, okay? But it's also possible to paint on the screen any widget without having defined previously. And the way to do that is that you go navigator.push context, and this time, instead of push named, we're just using push, and we're giving a material page route, and it builds a widget. Okay, that's the syntax to give it if you don't have it predefined. All right? So, any questions so far on this navigator? Just to wrap up, it pops, it pushes a replacement, right? We can define the routes in the material app. In the beginning of our app, we can define. It's a simple enough method to navigate between pages. And you can either push a page at the parallel level without increasing the stack size with push replacement, or you can push it on top of it and you increase the stack size. Okay, so let's go to our code. Okay, and in our code, this is where I've defined these routes. Okay, and the important bit is how I'm actually switching. Okay, and the switching is going to happen in the home page. So I have this home page. Okay. So in the home page, I have a bunch of text, but I have these buttons. So let's look at the home page and the app. So that's how the home page looks. This is explaining what it does. And I have 3 buttons, and each of them will push a different route onto the stack. Okay? So the first one, login no block qubit, so this one, right? This button, it's going to push the /no block onto the qubit. And what was the /no block? /no block was, so we go to main, we hinge it. /no block was bringing the stateful login page. And what is that? I can go to definition of it. Stateful login was, remember this one, that the first thing that we did with the repository. So let's, any question? Okay, so let's go to this, click on this. So we have our initial repository demo, and it should work. And what do you notice here is this thing, the back arrow, okay? Why did the back arrow appear there? Anybody knows?
I think your slide said because it was poppable.
Yes. Does it say that somewhere? Okay.
And your slide at the bottom.
Yeah. So because it's poppable, it will automatically put this leading. This is called the leading of the app bar, right? Remember that, the leading of the app bar. The actions of the app bar appear here. The actions is a list of widgets, appear on the right-hand side. The leading is a single widget. I mean, it's not a list. It comes automatically, this one, because this is sitting, because we pushed it. We didn't do a push replacement, we did a push. Okay, so this is not that interesting. The next one is the qubit implementation. Again, it's what we did with the qubit, and this is fine. Reset, etc. We just saw the qubit thing. I've just plugged it in here. Now the third one is the block. Okay, the third one is the block. But before we play with the block, let's just go to the diagram of how the block pattern works in detail. Okay, so just for reference, let's go back to the qubit. Remember, the qubit is created by the login page. The qubit is created. Then it emits a login state. Then the block builder switches the views, right? And each view can call the methods of the qubit directly. This is clear, right? With the qubit. I mean, the block is not that different, but if you remember the qubit structure, now these guys, they are no longer calling the methods directly. So these user interaction is only creating events, and events are added to the block. So they are added to the block. And the block has a mechanism to convert those events into method calls, right? It will then call methods. They are triggered by events. It will call some of these methods and then emit finally a login state. And the rest of the page is again a block builder, which does similar, which works exactly the same as the qubit, okay? But they are no longer interacting with the methods directly, okay? Now, sorry. This is the way we have implemented it in this code, where our login page created the block. So the block is only visible to the login page. But typically, the block should be all the way at the top. It should be available as a service to anyone, okay? It should be available as a service to anyone. If the login page wants to use that block and it wants to consume its state, it can do so, right? It doesn't have to create it. It just have to know that it's created above, right? So this is the two ways that you can structure the block. But in our implementation now, it's this way. I've implemented, but then later on we will implement also the other way. So you have both examples. Any questions on the block before we go to and look at the code and how it's done in the code? Any conceptual questions?
How about the homework? Which one do we have to do?
The homework, ideally, I would like you to do it with a block and not a qubit, so that you practice the block, okay? Where you put the block, it doesn't matter at this stage. You can put it under the page, together with the page or way above in the app. Yes?
So, like, what's the advantage to using block in comparison to qubit?
Right. So the advantage to using block is the qubit is, because you are with the qubit, you are really, the UI is directly interacting with the engine, right? Whereas with the you know, like, how should I say, like you're getting your car fixed, okay, and the customer is coming in and trying to tighten some bolts himself or something, or you know, is telling the mechanic, oh, why don't you change the tire here, and so on and so forth. Whereas the block is, the customer is filling an order and giving it to the service department, and the service department then goes and tells the mechanic to change the tire. It's that type of difference, let's say. I mean, let's make an analogy. And the good thing is, for example, the events emitted by these guys, you can, like the events that's emitting from for example, you need to change the tire, right? You can have an event where it says tire is worn out event, or you can have a tire is irreparably damaged event. Both of the events will result with a change tire, right? So the method that's going to be called is change tire. But maybe with these two events, you do a different logs, and you can keep different tabs of other things, or maybe you can store them in analytics and so on and so forth. All of that gives you, whereas if you did it with qubit, you have to call multiple methods, nested methods, and so on and so forth. For traceability, it would be difficult. This gives you a much better traceability, but only if the app requires it. I mean, if it's a really simple thing, like you're pushing a button to increase a counter, you don't need a full block mechanism. Okay? So, if there are no further questions, I'll move on to the code, and let's look at the code where it's implemented. So, remember the name login, I've reserved it for the qubit implementation, and I've created a folder called sign-in, which is pretty much the same thing, but here I've implemented it with a block, okay? Again, I have the error view, initial view, signed-in view, and waiting view. It has the same views, right? But now I have a sign-in block, or before that, sign-in state. What are my states? I have an initial, error, waiting, and signed-in state, like in the login, the same states. Events, there is a sign-in with email event, which basically carries, the event carries the information of the email and password. Okay, wherever it's captured, it sends that email and password. Then an error event is triggered, let's say with some error text, and then a reset event is the same thing as calling the reset function. So in the block, now I'm going inside the block. In the block, in the beginning of the block, with this on keyword, I'm assigning handlers for each of these events. So these are the event handlers for that block. This one is the abstract event, so forget it. Sign in with email event. Okay, call the login user function, like this. Sign in error event, then call the error function. Sign in reset event, call the reset function. And they are pretty much the same things as in the qubit. They are the same similar methods as in the qubit. Reset just does this and emits an initial state. Error emits an error state. Login user first emits a waiting state, then does the sign in and sets it to the user, and emits a signed-in state. It's exactly the same as in the qubit, but it is done through this mechanism of emitting events, catching events, and then converting them to method calls. Okay? And let's see it in action. So if I go to login with block, I can again do this. It emits the this one. I can trigger the error and continue doing what I need to do. So it's pretty much the same. It's just the 3 different implementations. You can use this as a reference whenever you need to and compare it to the qubit. But because they are doing the same thing, it's easier to compare the differences. Okay? Any questions? Yes?
Can the block take in more than one set of events and states?
What do you mean?
So for example, if I want sign-in block to be aware of a different set of events from a different
No, the block, okay. The block has this sealed class sign-in event, which is an abstract class that can only be extended within here. So this block can only process these events prescribed. But if you put the block all the way to the top, then you can basically trigger this from anywhere, and we will see it in a second. Okay? We were going to see that we can trigger this from multiple pages. It doesn't have to be in the same widget or in the same page. You can trigger it anywhere, as long as the block is in the context. As long as it's in the widget tree, that block, and I can reach it with the block provider of this block type, I can trigger it. Does that answer your question?
I think so, but
yeah, again, think of the block as a particular service or a particular business unit, okay? Like the car service department. One of them is you have a small service shop and you're interacting with the mechanic directly and you're telling him, change the tire. The other one is a BMW dealership with its service department and, service assistants with whom you deal with, and the mechanics you don't deal with directly. Okay? Think of it like that. One of them is a little bit more formal. The other one is more, mom and pop store. You go in and you say, okay, please fix my tire. Okay? So, but they have a set of rules. The car mechanic department, the BMW service center, it has a certain set of rules. You can either bring in for an oil change or for an annual service or for, winter tire change, etc. Certain events that you can trigger there. And they have a corresponding mechanic and corresponding process attached to it. Think of it like that. Okay. So now, okay, we're going to turn things up a notch, and we're going to go to this router idea. But so this, before I go to the router idea, the homework, I think it should be clear now how to do the homework, right? In the homework, we have books. We create some mock books. We have the mock class. We've worked on the mock class. You can extend the mock class to also create a book title or something, right? So that's easy. So you can now create books and with the mock class. Then you have a list of books which, when you create the block, the init function should basically create you 10 books or something with the mock, right? It's a way to do it. Then you have an initial view which should be when the initial thing is initiated, you can show a spinner and say, I'm trying to get the books, right? You can say, I'm trying to get the books with the initial spinner. Then, once you've got your books, once the init has run and you've populated your books, then you can emit a state, show a list of books. And in that case, you have a page with a list of books. And by default, you can say the sorting is done by author. So you can create a sorting enum, which is initially set to by author, okay? And then you can switch that sorting enum by emitting events, adding events to the block and so on. So you really have all the tools to do that homework, okay? And it will be really good exercise to really write the code, and then everything will sink in. And again, in the block, we don't deal with any of the routing mechanism or navigation and so on and so forth. All you have to do is go to your main.dart and you say, your home page is basically your book club page, right? And it has triggered a block while it's being created. That's all you have. So none of this is necessary, none of the routing or navigation. Okay? All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about this other way of navigation. But please, if something is not clear, stop me and ask me now. Yeah, yes.
Two questions. So,
Yes.
Okay, dumb question, but the book object, is that in the book class itself? Like the mock book that we're making? Like let's say if it's
Look at the user object, right? And copy from the user object, looking at the user model, because we have it still there in the code somewhere, right? The user model. Just looking at the user model, create a similar object that's like the book, because the book will have a string title, a string author, and a string image URL, right?
the example, I guess, instance or example object, that would be, we would put that in the user, or in the book file itself, or should we put that somewhere else?
Which one?
Okay, so let's say if you have to create examples of books like James and the Giant Peach and all that, then where would we?
Well, you will create a list of books. So you will create a book list variable, which is going to be a list of books, just like list of users. Remember, we also have the user list. We played with the user list. We created mock users and so on and so forth. It was in which page? In this page. Remember, in this page, we created a user list by saying list.generate, create mock user. You can use all of these, everything that you need is actually in parts of the code that we've already covered, right? So you'll have to create a book object, and you have to create the create mock book, method to be able to create a mock book using extending, the mock class that we did to create, mock.create title, mock.create author, mock.create book image.
Okay, so actually that's brings me to my next question, which is for the requisite field, is it just author, title, and then image, or do we have to do?
Oh, I think there was a description as well, right? Or there was an ISBN. You can put ISBN if you want to put ISBN. Put an ISBN as well. Anything you want to do, it's fine. I don't remember now what was the ask, but in the display, whatever I've given on Figma.
Just author and title.
But I think also there was a description, no? In the book detail, you have to show a description.
It says description.
Yeah. So then from the mock you create from lorem, 3 paragraphs of, let's say, 4 paragraphs of description of total, 300 words or whatever. I mean, make it look like, whatever it was. So, but this is how you generate the book list. This you generate when you initialize your block, right? That would be an easy way to do it. You initialize your block, and then from then on, you can show those pages. Again, one of the pages where you are being told to, show the books is, it would be this view. In the view, you would do this, and the source will come from the book list that you have in the block. So that would be one way of doing things. And I'm trying to see what else. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and like here I have a user card. You'll have to create two different widgets. That would be a book image widget and a book detail widget, let's say, right? That mimics the things in the just like we did these ones. Remember, we created these widgets that take a user object. You should create similar widgets that take a book object. Okay, that's the exercise. I mean, the exercise of this thing is to get some working understanding of the block, triggering events by clicking on filter by author, filter by title, that exercise, creating the book object, mocking it with the mock, and then also creating the screens, a list screen and also a detail screen. And that will give you all this exercise, really like on your fingertips of having said, okay, I've displayed the list, I've displayed the detail, I've operated I've run a block, and the block is now working, and I can make it work like this. Okay, so I think here I will unfortunately need to stop but can we keep it to 5 minutes, please? So it's 19:58. Let's be back here at 20. Yes, 03.
When you emit events, do you simply emit events to change the screen, or?
No, you emit states and you add events. So events is like, because think of the block as a big bucket. Think of the think of the block as a big bucket, and events just fall in it. And there is also a way to throttle events and so on and so forth. There's all these, things that you can expand. We're not going to talk about it now. It's already complicated. But the event mechanism also enables you to throttle it. And
so when we're sorting by author, date, whatever, title, should we just have a simple state? It's like stateful widget that just has that as a state?
No stateful widgets.
So all of them have to be
everything
stateless.
has to be done with the block builder. Depending on what state you're in, the block builder should give you a different page.
Okay, so then when I change the sorting, even though I have not changed the page, I should still erase an event?
No, you can change the page. The point is, you can do it this is what I was showing to Sissy earlier. I'll show the same page. I can even put it, if you want, to the here. Okay, so let's talk about the homework, okay? So if I click by title, okay, I add an event called sort by title to my block, okay? And now the block has to do something. The block will immediately say, okay, I don't want you to go and click other things while I'm thinking, okay? I'm gonna block you by putting a waiting state. So emit loading state. put the spinner in front of the user, okay? Then go into your engine and sort by title, and then also have a property of the block, for example, which could be sort by property, okay? And that should be, and you can define also an enum so that you don't use strings. And that enum could be set to sort type dot title, okay? You did this. Now, you again emit the same state as show the book list, right? You don't have two different states for the book list. You can have just one state, show the book list, right? And because whatever your list is, because you'll have inside your block also you'll have the book list, and if it's sorted this way or that way, your UI is going to show whatever the sorting is. The list view doesn't shift things around, okay? So you will then emit a book list state, and the GUI will repaint with the current way of sorting. Now, this book list state, so there's a loading view, there's a book list view, and there's a detail view, okay? When you first come into the thing, before you create your book list with the init function, when you've emitted the initial view, you can also sort the loading view, right? I'm trying to get the books from somewhere, from the database or something. You can show the loading view. And then once you've filled up your books, you've done the init method, you can emit the book list state, and the book list state is going to show the books. But then you have this buttons, the filter buttons or whatever, which have to say, I'm selected or I'm selected. And then each button can look into the block and say, oh, the sort type is sort type.author, so let me be in the selected state. I am going to check if the sort type is by title, then I'm going to be in the selected state or not selected state. And in either case, this one has to do the following. It should go and find the block and add a sort by title event. And this one should add a sort by author event, okay, to the block. That's one way I could do this. I mean, there's multiple ways to do it, but that's one way I could do it. Okay, if you guys want, I can put this into the module or into the homework so that everybody has this way of doing things. But this is not the only way to do it, right? You can do it many other ways. This is one way that could be done. So while I'm at it, let's put it into the assignments. Sorry, who came while we were talking?
I did.
Lauren, you came, right? Okay. Anybody else? Oh, add link. Okay, so that's there for you to look at, okay? And we just talked. Does anybody need to leave for a few minutes? Why don't we take 5 minutes, okay? Let's take a fresh air, 5 minutes. Let's come back here at 8:10, okay? 6 minutes. Okay, let's take a break. And then we really need to focus. The next 50 minutes is going to be really, really focused. Yes, Piyush.
Which pattern is mostly used in industry level, like block pattern or qubit pattern? Like at industry level, which is common?
Or both. Again, in general, if you are building your app, there's other patterns as well, right? There is, getX, there is provider, there is change. I mean, there's all these patterns that you can use. I'm just advocating the block pattern because it's a very robust pattern. It makes a lot of sense. But the qubit to block, you define it as how closely coupled you keep it to a page. If this is something that really just handles, one view and makes little changes, then use qubit. If it's a much bigger thing, then definitely you have to use block. For example, authentication. Right? Authentication, you definitely need to use block because you may check authentication status in different parts of the app. So you don't want to be created the qubit, because the qubit, you want it created together with a page. But, I mean, to be honest, there is no really hard rule on it. But block is a little bit more formal. Okay, one more minute and then keep going. Okay, now let's just look at this router again. So the sort of traditional routing with the with the material app is simply like this. You know, it doesn't give you a lot of control of what to do. I mean, actually it does, but it's a very cumbersome way of like doing things for route generation and so on and so forth. And what GoRouter does is it gives you quite a few things. First of all, declarative routing. It's a much more readable syntax of what happens when you have to go to a route. Simplicity. It also builds navigation guards. You know, if your state is like this, don't go there. If your state is there, you know, some redirects. Again, for testing, it's better. It gives URL handling for deep linking, and we will look at it in web as well about the URLs. Again, it's easier for state management and performance, okay? And we will see in a second what it actually gives us. So let's look at this. Let's look at this scheme of the router, okay? So we have a router object. It gives me, first of all, it gives me a redirect mechanism. Okay, when do I need a redirect mechanism? Somebody got a link from a website, okay, which goes and displays a user's credit card information. That's the link, okay? But that credit card information should only be shown to the user himself if he's authenticated. So then the redirect is going to check whether this guy is logged in, and it's going to check, okay, you cannot go to this page because you're not logged in. Then you have an error builder. So if there's an error with the way that the URL is formed, it's coming to your website or to your app through deep linking, and the URL is misformed, it should show you a nice error page saying that, sorry, I can't give you. It should do also exception handling, you know, other than the default exception handling, you should be able to specify it. And then it should have the routes, just like in the material app, we define the routes. Here we define the routes as well. The difference is the following. So this is the important part. So I can have two routes, route 1, route 2, okay? The route 2 could have sub-routes, okay? What these sub-routes do is they get pushed on the stack. So if, for example, I have this route, say this is, you know, /login, okay? The path of it is /login. Then it's at the top level. There's nothing, you know, below it, basically. But I could have a route called /login/forgot password. What that means is that if I define these routes, forgot password, sign up, and you know, whatever, I don't know, change email address or something. They would all be stacked above the login page, and with a back button, you know, from the forgot password, with a back button, you can fall down to the default login page. And in the default login page, if you click on forgot password, it pushes on the stack this forgot password while the login page, the main login page is below. And it's a mechanism that you can design with this syntax, okay? And we're going to see an example of it in the code. So how would I do this? How would I implement this? I mean, this is basically, sorry, go back. This is what we did with the previous app, right? With the 3 different implementations of the stateful widget, qubit, and block implementations. We had a home page with 3 buttons, and we pushed 3 different things onto the stack, right, with the navigator. Remember? We pushed them onto the stack with the navigator. Here, we're going to do the exact same thing, but with the router. So again, you can compare how the 2 different methods have done it. And for that, I am no longer using material app, but I'm using something called material app.router. So the constructor for the material app is material app.router. And it takes a router config parameter, a router which we will see, it's called a goRouter object. But before I do that, what I don't want to do is I don't want to call the route names as strings from within my app, because then I can, mistype the string, etc. So it's much better to define them as class names. So if I want to call, let's say, home, I say route name.home, and it's a much tighter code within the app. Now, what does the routing look like, or this router object look like? So the router object is a goRouter. It has a routes property, which has a top-level route, which is / which is the home, right? And the name of it is router name.home. And remember, we defined it as string home. The path is / and the builder gives me a home page. Okay? Builder gives me a home page. And the routes, so the block route is a child of this route. So you see, the goRouter has routes, that's the top level. And then I have a goRoute of the home page, and this route already also has child routes. When it's a child route, it gets pushed on the stack. So if I call, for example, go to the route block, right? What it will do is, how do I go to block? Block, in order to go to block, I need to first go to / and then I need to go to block, meaning I first build the home page, and then on top of it, I build the block page, right? I build 2 pages on top of each other. I don't ignore this page. I build this page while I'm going there, okay? And remember, we implemented the login process with a block, and we called it the sign-in page. With a qubit, we called it the login page. And with the stateful widget, very primitively, we called it the stateful login page. And what I've done is, in this lecture 8 start, so lecture 8 start, in this code, which you have it there, I've implemented the Go router. Okay, exactly doing the same thing, so you can compare, but with the Go router method. Okay, so let's get that. And I had downloaded it already to my branches. Huh? Is everything okay? So you should get material app.router now in your main.dart. And we're going to look at the router and we're going to see how it works. Give you one more minute. Go lecture 8 start. Any questions so far? The difficult part is coming after this. I don't know if we're going to be tangling out of it or not, but the nested navigation is it's a necessity. Every app has it, the nested navigation, so we can't just stop here and say, okay, we've covered Go router. We have to do nested navigation. Then you really have something that you can use in real life. Okay, so let's look at our code. I have the material app.router, and in the router config, I pass the router object, and I've defined the router object here under navigation. Define the router object, and here I've defined the route names just so that I don't have to type text when I'm calling them, because I'm going to be calling these routes from inside the code from different places. There's somebody who's going to click a button and say, go to that page, go to that page, etc. When I'm using those, I don't want to be typing text. Okay, so my Go router, we've seen this already, the top level route and the child routes. And child routes brings the sign-in page, which corresponds to the block implementation. The login page corresponds to the qubit implementation, and the stateful login page corresponds to the no block implementation. It's exactly like we had in the navigator version. Okay. So this is the router, and let's look at the home page, which is basically this page, right? How that looks. So on the home page, I have 3 buttons, 3 filled buttons, and the first one, so the way we go, instead, remember, navigator.push named is what we were using before. Here, we're saying context.go named. Okay, the syntax is context.go named. And the first one is the root name.noBlock. So basically, this brings the stateful widget. The second one is context.go named qubit implementation and block implementation. And it's exactly the same as the navigator one, but using the Go router. And if I click on this, I've come here. come here. Okay, and with this one it's the same. So I'm hoping that I didn't implement something. Thank you. Just 1 second. I don't have the, yeah, no, it's fine. Okay, so it's exactly the same pages, but brought with the router. And what we haven't done is, if we go to this page in the presentation, I mean, we haven't done this, we haven't done this, we haven't done this, we haven't implemented any of that, you know. The router object has only these objects at the moment. So, any questions about this? No? Very clear? And the implementation, you have it. The logic, you have it. It's a good reference that you can go back to. Right. So, now comes the complicated bit that we really need to pay attention, and hopefully that will be your next homework to implement that. Okay, that's the hardest bit, and if you do that in the homework, then you'll have hands-on experience to do it. Okay, app functionality. You know, the very, very basic app functionality. What I want is that if the authentication state changes, I want the app to kick me out. Okay? If for whatever reason authentication changes, I want it to kick me out. So that is done by a property of the Go router, which is refresh listenable. What does it mean, refresh listenable? Is that I have the ability to listen. So the Go router has the ability to listen to a notifier, and every time something comes from that notifier, it refreshes itself. Okay? And during that refresh, it's going to look at the redirect. Okay? Because redirect only kicks in when the Go router is working, if a route is being asked for. Okay? But the refresh listenable can trigger the redirect without somebody actually having called a new route. Okay? So if the authentication state changes, it goes into the refresh listenable, and then it will trigger a redirect. And then if, for example, if you say that, oh, I'm no longer logged in, you can put in a logic there that say, okay, if you're not logged in, don't show him the credit card details page, show him the login page. Okay? So refresh listenable and redirect, they work together to do changes. And you can have multiple things. You could have a login, you could have something with a timer, you know, some event has already passed, and so on. You know, I don't know, like your class has started and you had put in a timer, and once that passed, it's no longer showing that something on the app, etc. You can do multiple things. Then think of an app where you can have a bottom navigation bar, like in many apps you have the bottom navigation bar, but the bottom navigation bar only appears after you've logged in. So the bottom navigation bar is there to switch between pages, and in fact they even have to maintain the state of those pages, but that's another thing. So that is done by something called the shell route. Okay, and we'll see in a second in the big picture how that shell route works. And then the other thing is you're in the, you have these 5 tabs underneath, okay? And you have one of them is a profile page. Now, when you go into the, when you click on the profile page, it shows you the profile, but when you click inside the profile page, when you click on edit picture, you get a new page. But in that new page, you don't have the bottom bars anymore, the bottom buttons. It's a blank page. So there has to be also a mechanism in that nested navigator. There has to be a mechanism to get rid of the bottom bar when you are in certain places. You should be able to prescribe it. So all of that is possible with the Go router, and we're going to see all of these things implemented. And this Lecture 8 Nested is implementing all of these features, and we're going to go look in a little bit more detail. But this is just sort of listing the ideas. And now let's see these ideas in this picture. So you have your home page, and oh, sorry, there is a mistake here. This should also have a page underneath. So this is your home page, the users page. Let me put it actually before I forget. Okay, so this is the home page. Remember, we had the qubit block and the no block, 3 pages. They were sitting on top of the home page. Think of users and profiles sitting on the home page, but the users and profiles, they have this bottom navigation bar. If users are clicked, you have this. If profile is clicked, you have this. Okay? I mean, this is, I'm saying, you know, we don't know how to do it yet, but it's a typical app behavior, right? You get this style, and you would have like 5 of them, but whatever. Here, we're just showing 2. And then, if in the profile page you click on detail, you get a profile detail page with a back button that sits on top of the profile page without the bottom navigation. And if you were to have a URL for it, it would probably look like profile/detail. Yeah? So this is a typical app behavior. And if you're not logged in, you would be in a login page. You wouldn't be in /user/login. You would be just in /login. Typical app behavior, right? So the objective is now to see how we can do this. Okay? So this is my Go router. Oh, now I have also an authentication block which sits over somewhere, which has an authentication state. Basically, it will have, like every block, it will have an authentication initial state, because that's like when the block is created, it doesn't know anything about the world. It hasn't checked whether the guy is authenticated, if there's a cache which stores his authentication token from the previous sessions, etc. Because when you go into Instagram and you fire up the app, how does it know it's you? Because it has cached it, right? But the app still needs a tiny bit of instance to get it from the cache. Okay, so the authentication block is attached to this refresh listener of the Go router. So this guy constantly listens to the authentication state. Are you logged in? Are you not logged in? Are you logged in? If the authentication state changes, this guy becomes aware of it, and it says to the Go router, run it again. When it runs again, the redirect says, hang on, let me see if I need to do anything. Okay? Is the guy authenticated? Then push this page. If the guy is not authenticated, push this page, or route to this page, right? That's what the redirect guy does. And yes, schematically, I think that's a way to describe a very, very basic app with with navigation. I mean, if you were going to build any app like Splitwise or Goodreads or something, you would have this type of structure, correct? And it would be good to be able to do this structure or learn how to do this structure, because for your app you will use something like this. And again, I'm showing you one method of doing things. There's always multiple methods. You're free to use them as long as they are robust and they work, okay? But this is one way that works. Okay, wow. Let's now look at our Go router, okay? Because this is where we define everything with the Go router. So, before I come to this, we have the redirect, the error builder, exception handling. Now we have this refresh listener as well. We need to see how we fill this refresh listener. That's a property of the Go router that we need. And then we know that the Go router starts with, filling routes. It has routes, okay? One of the routes will be login by itself at the top level, right? Without any childs and so on and so forth. And at the 0 level, there is the login route. It gives me the login page. Then I have the home page. It will be at the same level as the login, okay? But after that, I have like a second navigation, sort of, right? Which is the switching between users and profile, So that second navigation is done by shell route. The thing with the shell route is that it also needs its own scaffold. Okay? The shell route needs its own scaffold, and therefore we need to give it a widget called a scaffold with a bottom nav bar. I mean, that's something that we need to create because every app will have a different looking bottom bar, or it could be in the bottom, it could be on the left, it could be on the right, whatever, or on the top. It will change, but it will need a switching mechanism at that level that's sitting above the home, right? So it needs this object. And then, because this is a different navigator, we also give different identities to it, let's say keys. So this one gets a shell navigator key, and this basic one, the root one, gets the root navigator key. Normally, you don't need to attach to these navigator keys, but in order to be able to get rid of the bottom buttons, the navbar buttons in a detail page, right? When you go to profile detail or book detail, etc., you don't want to show the buttons anymore. You just want to show a back button. In that case, you have to switch to the root navigator. We're going to see it. But that's why when you create them, you also keep a reference to their keys. Yes? Josiane, you have a question? You have a reference. So then, the shell route has, remember, it has the users page and the profile page at its core, right? This would be the users page, and this big yellow one would be the profile page, except the profile page is sitting, inside the profile page also sits the detail page, right? Pushed on top of it. And the way we do it is, within that route, we define extra routes. I mean, we define the routes object of it, and we fill in with this pushed object, okay? And that would be the profile detail page. But in order to get rid of the bottom nav bar, I say to it, your navigator is not the shell navigator, which has the bottom nav bar. Your navigator is the root navigator, which doesn't have the bottom app bar. Okay? So this is the then the pattern that you can create to go between these pages, and if there is a logout event, you go to the login page. All right. So, any questions on this page? I mean, there's a lot of information here. You won't be able to memorize it, but you should study it and you should map it to the code. And we're gonna just look at the code. We have like 20 more minutes. We can talk about the code. So, what are the key things here? Every router has routes, right? Every router needs a bunch of routes. The routes that are sitting at the same level are parallel to each other, right? And then any route that sits under it, any route that sits as part of the routes of this go route are going to be pushed above it. So this shell route is pushed above it, but it's pushed above it as a separate navigator. So therefore, it can have multiple pages at the same level. So we pushed above the home page this shell route, which has the users and profile page. And then, obviously, each of those pages can have its child pages or child routes. Okay? All right, so let's slowly go through the implementation part, which we will look in the code, but I've put in here so we can talk about it easier. So first of all, how do I create these navigator keys? This is the syntax to create the navigator keys. I have a global key navigator state. So this is a key for the navigator state. Remember, in the form, we also created a form key. You recall in the form, we created a form key. And that form key was referring to what? A form? It's global, but it was referring to a form or what?
A form object.
Form state. Okay? Because state, so the form itself is a stateful widget, right? The state of it is the current implementation of it, right? The current thing that the current holdable widget that is built. So therefore, you need to go to the state of it rather than to the navigator. So the global key of navigator is not going to give you anything. The global key of navigator state gives you the actual implemented or actually painted or created navigator at that point. So this is how you create the global keys for the navigator, shell navigator or root navigator. Okay. Next, configure your router. Okay. So this is a technicality that you shouldn't really dwell too much on it, but the block emits a stream. Okay. Remember, we did the stream. We did a quick example of the stream with the with Dart. The block emits a stream, but this guy requires the listenable, like a change notifier. So this object, I mean, this is created again in our code, but this is basically just turning the stream into a change notifier. It's something that you can listen to. Because the stream is something that you read in from, right? But the listenable is something that that emits something, okay? So, or triggers a change. So the refresh listenable is basically pointed to the authentication blocks stream. And stream contains what? In the stream, the authentication block sends what? What does an authentication block emit?
State.
And where do those states live? If I emit the state, I emit it to where? No, the block is emitting the states. To what are you? Huh?
The view,
To the stream.
the string.
Yes. So the block. So if you emit something, it goes into a stream. The stream is the holder of these, newly emitted things, right? So the block emits to the stream, okay, and therefore the block has a stream. So authentication block has a stream, and the objects that are in the stream are authentication states. Okay? So from these authentication states, I will be able to know whether I'm in the login initial place or authentication initial or authentication logged in or authentication logged out states. So this is now my listenable, and this is my redirect. Let's understand the redirect quickly. So every time the authentication changes, or any time somebody clicks on a button to change the route, I need to check the redirect. Okay, I need to check, do I need to redirect? Do I obey the guy asking me to go somewhere? Or do I have some guards? That's the guard mechanism of the router. Do I have some guards to first hang on? Can I actually go? So if authentication block state is authentication logged out, okay, if it's logged out, and the state here is the router state. Don't forget, don't mix it up with the block state, because we're in the router, and the state is the router state, and the router state has the full path of the desired route. So if I'm already sitting in a route, my router state is wherever I was sitting. If I'm requested to go to a route, so I'm on the login page or users page, I need to go to this, profile page, then the full path of the route is the new route, or is the destination route where I need to go to. But if I'm sitting on the route and I'm just issued a refresh because of the refresh listenable, then I'm basically trying to go to the same place that I'm already at. Okay? So what is my full path? If my full path is not starting with login, because the point is, for example, why am I putting this logic here? Pay attention. I could be on the login page, and the login page could have on top of it a forgot password page. So if I'm already on the login page and my full path is /login/forgot password, okay, then if I don't put this, I'll go back to the initial beginning of the login page, which I don't want, because if I'm on the login page, I'm trying to fix my password and stuff like that, and the app is trying to kick me back to the one level below, which you don't want. So therefore, if the root starts with /login, it's okay. The guy is trying to fix something with login, don't molest him, okay? But if he's somewhere else, if it doesn't start with login, if he's in the home page, if it's the user page, if it's in the profile page, if it doesn't start with login, then send him to the login page, and if he's logged out. And if it's not starting, if it's logged in basically, and he's already in the login page, if it's in the login page, or if he's logged in, then send him to users. So your redirect, again, there could be certain edge cases that doesn't work and so on and so forth. For example, anyway, there is some edge cases that may not work with this one. We don't need to dwell on it. The most important thing here is that you understand how the redirect helps you, how it's connected to the authentication state. And it could be connected to many other things, but this is the most basic example, authentication state. Any questions on this part? Okay, so let's see what my authentication block is. Okay, my authentication block will have authentication login event and logout event, 2 events. And if it's login, then it will emit authentication logged in. if it's logout, it will omit authentication logout. Okay? And the events are, corresponding events are, login and logout events. And the states are the initial state, which is sort of like the unknown state. Then the logged in state and logged out state. I mean, very basic, very standard stuff. Now, how do I insert the authentication block? I've kept the repository because it's from earlier, it doesn't matter. But just before the material app, I wrap it with a block provider, and I create the authentication block. But pay attention here, because I define the authentication block. I basically instantiate it here. I instantiate the authentication block here. Instead of, because in other cases, we've created the authentication block right here, instantiated here without having a explicit reference. And whenever we needed it, we reference it by block provider.auth authentication block of context. But here, I've created it because in my router, listenable, I need a reference to it. Okay, it's a subtlety, but it's something that you need to understand. So that's why I've declared it here and instantiated here. Now, the router config, I turned it into a function because I want to pass the authentication block to it. So it's not just the object. It's just a simple function which takes the authentication block because I need to inject the stream in it, right? That's why I need to do it like that. And looking at again at the router demo, it returns a Go router simply. The only thing is the way I do this with a function is that I can inject this authentication block here. And I think it's described on the side explanations, I hope. Yeah, we defined the authentication block. Okay, so now let's look at the routes. The routes are, at the top level, there's the login route. Remember, at the top level, there's the login route. At the same level, there is the home route with a slash. Now, as a child of the home route, we have the shell route. And shell route has all the other things that we will open up in a second. But the shell route has the profile page and user page routes, okay? So that's the nesting. And to the, in the definition of the router, I supply the root navigator key. And with the shell route, I supply the shell navigator key, okay? Shell navigator key is supplied here. And if you look at this definition of the Go router at the top, because I can't show it all in one page, I've supplied the root navigator key. Okay? So, again, two top-level routes, login and home. And under home, the shell route, which injects the scaffold with navbar, and then it injects the, and then it puts the routes underneath. Now, open up the shell route, the closed element, open up. The shell route has user route, profile route, and then profile route has, as its child route, a detail page, right? So that will be pushed on top of it. Okay. And what did we say? This one's parent navigator key is root navigator key so that I don't have the buttons underneath when I'm looking at the profile detail. Okay? Now, what is the scaffold with navbar? Okay, so that's another widget. What is that? So that is a widget which is basically a scaffold, right? It's basically a scaffold. It returns a scaffold when I call this widget. And it has a child parameter, and it puts the child in the body. Now, who is that child? That child is either the user page itself or the profile page itself. So when you are painting onto the screen, so when you are painting the user page on the screen and you have this bottom navigation bar, right? The user's object or widget is going to be painted in this place, and this place is saved for that bottom navigation bar. So the body of that scaffold navbar, so the body of it is, next one. Yeah, the body of it is whatever we need to display, and then in the bottom of it is this bottom navigation bar, which is a Flutter object. It's not a defined object, it's a Flutter object. And this bottom navigation bar has two items, an icon and name, two items, okay? And it has this current index property, so because this is two items, index can only be 0 or 1. And then on tap, it's basically whatever index is tapped. So if the first button or second button or third button, whatever index is tapped, it sends this index to this function, and then you need to deal with that function. You need to write the function. What should I do with index 0, index 1, index 2, etc. Okay? And you have to tell him you are at this index so that it can show this button selected and not selected, and also show the respective widget inside it. Okay, so calculate selected index. How do I calculate the selected index? I can go look at the Go router. Okay, I can look at my Go router because in the widget tree, the Go router sits really on the top. I look at the Go router state, look at the path, and if my path starts with users, my index should be 0. If it starts with profile, my index should be 1. Okay? So this calculate index function therefore shows the selected button on the bottom navigation bar. The on item tab, it gives me I get it with this function. I get the index of the button that's being tapped and the context. And if index is 0, then go find the Go router and go to the named called root name.users. So because the 0 index should go to the users, and this one, it should go to the profile. Simple, okay? So that's the scaffold navbar widget. Again, you can expand this, you can do it funkier and so on and so forth, but it's a basic pattern of using it. Now, this one, again, this is a technicality, but basically it can get a list of stream subscriptions, and it has an internal variable called list stream subscriptions, and it subscribes to the stream. Okay, it subscribes to the stream as a broadcast stream. A broadcast stream and a normal stream are different. As a broadcast stream, when you take something from the stream, you haven't depleted it. But as a normal stream subscription, when you take it from the stream, nobody else can subscribe to it. It's depleted. As a broadcast, multiple people can take for it. Again, technicality, take it like this if you need to use it. But this is a code that works, and whenever you want